Sixers insider Derek Bodner, 97.3 ESPN.com. He was doing a lot of draft work, USA Today, Philly Mag, Liberty Ballers. You know his stuff. You've heard him on the air throughout the Sixers season. And now, Derek, year 3 of the Sam Hinkie era has some people wavering on whether or not there is a plan, whether it's working. I'll tell you, I think people are starting to lose patience here after the 2 years here. Is it fair to say that those fans have reason to be a little frustrated?
Well, I think it's largely dependent on how you're measuring it. I think a lot of people were looking at it, especially coming up to the draft when you had the third pick. They were looking at it like, all right, we have a center. We have 2 big men. Exactly what position they'll play, it's kind of interchangeable. But we have Embiid, we have Noel, and now we're going to have our guard, our point guard in Russell. And I think you started to see kind of the constructs of a team, the framework of a team. And I think when that didn't happen, I think a lot of people are, it almost seems like you're back at square one. But to me, I always look at it, what really is progress? And I think progress is getting that, get that great player, that franchise player. I think it's pretty easy to go from, 30 wins or wherever the Sixers were when Sam Hinkie took over and get back to 40 wins and get back to the playoffs and get back to, competitive basketball. And I think if he would have done that, or if he wanted to do that, he could have. But it's always that next step that's always tough. It's getting from 40 to 50 wins. And I don't think you can really do that unless you have a truly great player. So to me, I measure progress as having a franchise player. And I do think they're making progress in that regard. I think you can't look at the progress that Nerlens Noel made. And I don't think he's necessarily a franchise player, but I think he's, you can center a defense around him. And now you have, Embiid, and obviously that's a question mark. But adding Okafor to that, I feel much better about their chance of having a franchise player now than I did 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, I do think they're making progress.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, because it comes up a lot, Derek, about the plan. What's the plan? It doesn't look like they have a plan. I don't think they have a plan. Is it fair to say that anybody has a definitive plan? I mean, when you get to a draft, you might say, my plan is I want D'Angelo Russell. But if he's not there, is your plan a failure? I mean, so do you look at this quote-unquote plan, and do you have a definition or a view of what it is? Do you think it's a failing plan? What is the plan? What is your overview of the plan?
Well, I think it's more philosophy. I think at this point it's more philosophy, and that philosophy is getting, doing whatever it takes to get a franchise-type player. And I think once you get that, and once they feel confident that they have that, then the plan becomes to surround that with talent that can win a championship. So I think, I'm not nearly as down. I think a lot of people were D'Angelo Russell or bust. And I think
I wasn't one of them.
You weren't. And I think we kind of lost sight of how good Jahlil Okafor is. And, yeah, maybe in 3 years, the 3 big men that the Sixers have don't fit. But if all 3 of them work out, and really we're talking about Nerlens Noel, because if let's say Okafor and Noel work out, I don't think anybody really has a problem with that. But if all 3 work out and Embiid's good and Embiid's as dominant as we think he can be, and they have 2 dominant big men, then yeah, I think that plan's working out. I think that's a problem I'd be happy to have. So yeah, I think right now it's more philosophy, and that philosophy is to put yourself in the best position to get the best franchise talent. Things have not worked out perfectly, but I think if you look back at 2013, I think they got the best player in that draft, and they didn't even have a top 10 pick when they started that.
Agree.
I think if you look back at 2014, I think they got the best talent in the draft and the player who can be the best player. And obviously, you're going to need a lot of luck in terms of injury to get that. But I think they got a top 3 player in this draft too. So it's hard for me to say it's really a failure, even though maybe the results on the court aren't what people want.
There's a good possibility, Derek, as we just mentioned, they might have got the best player the last 3 years. I mean, in 3 years down the road, we might be saying, man, they got the best 3 players in the 3 consecutive drafts. And I think what that shows is what you said. The philosophy is grab the best player, and if one of those guys turns out to be the superstar that you're looking for, that everyone's looking for, then you fill in around that particular guy, and then you make decisions based on that. Instead of saying, well, we needed a point guard, let's just take a point guard, even though he's not a better player than Okafor. If you think Okafor is the best player, you take him. And if he turns out to be the best player on your team, then you finally have something. People just want you to take positions, and it seems like in the NBA, Derek, there are no more positions.
Yeah, no, I think Sam Hinkie spent about 0 time this past spring sitting around thinking about how he needed a point guard. I think he thinks he needs great players. I think, and it's really interesting. You look at how much movement there's been in good point guards around the league lately. From guys like Brandon Knight and Isaiah Thomas and Goran Dragic changing teams last at the trade deadline. And then you have Eric Bledsoe reported to be available now. Those are 4 really good players that could change hands, and MCW. So 5 really good players who could change hands in the course of, 4 months. Point guards are out there. You can get a point guard. If you end up getting a great big man, you can go out and find a point guard who can complement him. And I think that's key. I think a lot of these guys, these role player type guys, their success is really dependent on who they're complementing and what kind of skill sets you need to complement them. And going out and spending money and spending assets, giving up draft picks, giving up, what have you, to get them right now when you don't know who's really your focal point of a team, I think that is a little bit risky, to be honest.
Yeah, no, for the people who are, just they've had it. They didn't see any progress. Wins and losses, they went from 19 down to 18. They didn't take the step up. I guess the question really would be is, what is progress to those people? If you're only viewing wins and losses, how would you talk to those people and explain to them that there has been progress and that this team is making a step in the right direction? Because if their retort is they won less games, they're not making progress. I didn't see any progress, wins and losses. The Sixers would say, well, we're doing things behind the scenes. Is that a fair answer? Is that an answer that you're accepting as a Sixer fan?
Well, I can't really say that however you view progress is wrong. I can't tell you what to root for as a fan. I certainly understand the viewpoint that, I go down to the Wells Fargo Center to be entertained. I turn on the TV to be entertained, and I want to watch good basketball, and I don't like losing like this. I can't tell you you're wrong. What I can say is that I was at the Phillies World Series. I was at Game 5 of the 2008 World Series, and that's a moment I'll never forget. And for me, fandom is the build-up to that, and to get to that point, and to enjoy that point. And I think what the Sixers are doing is, not necessarily the only way to get to that point, but I do think it's the best chance from where they started. So, I think it's how much are you willing to sacrifice? How much does this bother you? Not for a championship, because I think if we all had a guarantee that what they're doing would be successful and get a championship in 3 or 5 years or whatever have you, I think pretty much everyone would be on board. But it's how much are you willing to sacrifice for the chance of being really relevant in the NBA.
No, and I think the point is right. If it does, I think a lot of people want it to happen overnight, and it's like if it doesn't happen this year, then it's a failure, and you can't have that mentality. I mean, Golden State took how many years? They drafted Steph Curry's been. Cleveland took the best player on planet Earth and still hasn't been able to win a championship. It just isn't, number one, easy. It's about having the most opportunities to get that chance. Cleveland has LeBron James. He left. He's come back. And they still haven't won a championship. You can't get a better player than that. It shows you how hard it is, but if you have a collection of great players, that should give you multiple opportunities. San Antonio doesn't win it every single year, but they come damn close a lot because they have multiple great players.
Yeah. No, and I mean, they're the team that you look at and they just, they nailed every part of it. They nailed obviously getting Duncan and being bad at the right time and having their ping pong balls fall the right way. But they nailed, later in the draft. I mean, Ginobili was a second-round pick. Parker was a late first-round pick. Kawhi Leonard, who they got, much later on in that run, obviously was, was he a late lottery pick? They traded a pretty good point guard for. So, they're kind of like the blueprint of if you make good decisions, then eventually it's going to catch up. But yeah, it's there's a lot of teams that have, even Minnesota, who so far, they ended up getting the number 1 pick 2 years in a row through a trade, obviously, and they still didn't win very many games last year, even with the number 1 pick, contributing. There's a lot that has to go on.
Well, and the point to be made there is, Derek, that young players, while they could be individually talented, aren't going to turn your team into a winner immediately. And if you're banking on a 19, 20, 21-year-old kid to all of a sudden turn your team from a 19-win team to a 55-win team, that's not going to happen overnight. But you want to see that these guys are getting the league, that they're, able to adjust and become pro players, and then hopefully when they mature together, that those wins and success starts to come with them.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, even in Oklahoma City, Durant winning 22 games or whatever it was his first 2 years, Westbrook coming in, and they're probably the team that did it as similar to the Sixers as you can, because they let Westbrook come in and just have the ball in his hands as much as they could. They let him come in and really learn on the fly and not really put a whole lot of talent around him and not put a whole lot of veterans around him. And they wanted him to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and really just get NBA minutes and be able to build off of that. So it's a lot like what the Sixers have done with Noel and with MCW and just putting him out there and putting him out there without a whole lot of talent around them.
Hindsight's 50-50, 2020, whatever you want to call it. The MCW trade. What is the thought on that now?
I still have no regrets on that. I just don't. I'm not all that high.
Nor
on
do
MCW.
I, by the way.
And I'm not convinced that the Lakers pick is. A lot of people are talking playoffs right now. 7 of the 8 teams out west won 50 games last year in the playoffs. Oklahoma City missed the playoffs with 45 wins. And you're telling me that D'Angelo Russell, a rookie, Julius Randle, who's essentially a rookie, is going to come in there and all of a sudden make them relevant again, take them from 21 wins, and an old broken down Kobe Bryant, who's not near the defender and probably takes more shots than he should. Those 3 people aren't going to make them a 50-win team. I don't think they're even close. And yeah, maybe they do something in free agency. Maybe Kevin Love wants to, go back to that area. Maybe LaMarcus Aldridge, although I have to think he's looking for more of a contender. But to me, it's still a big leap for that pick not to be a lottery pick next year.
Yeah, the MCW thing, a lot of people look back to and wonder if they made a mistake there. And obviously, because he plays a position that the Sixers are lacking, I think their actions speak volumes, that they didn't think that he was the right point guard for their team. And obviously, moving forward here, how about, we're going to get into a lot of topics in this next hour. 609-573-ESPN, 609-573-3776. You can chime in, text ESPN and your questions to the number 89,000 on the Harbor Pines Golf Club text board. We've got a ton of tweets that have been coming in throughout the course of the day that we'll read off. Obviously, 2 years now. It's hard because Embiid and Sarge both did not play last year.
Yep.
How much has that, quote-unquote, held back the plan?
Well, I think what it's really held back is probably the perception of the plan. I think
that's a good point.
As we saw, I think when Iverson was coming up, you don't necessarily have to win games right away. But if you see, that ray of light and you see him as a potential superstar, which he clearly was when he first came in the league, then you're accepting of a rebuild and you can see the progress, even if it's not necessarily in wins and losses. I think if you saw Embiid, play 82 games last year, and you saw the potential that he had, and you could see why, losing all those many games, why there was, an outcome that you could really get behind, I think there would be a lot more positivity around the team. Would they be all that different in terms of wins and losses right now? Probably not. Like you said, there's just not many rookies that come in and can really change a team right away. I think Embiid, for as great as I do think he is, and I have almost no doubt that he's a superstar if he's healthy, day one, year one, he's going to come in, he's going to be learning a lot on the fly. And he's going to show flashes, but it's not going to be consistent dominance. So I think it's more the perception. I think if fans were watching him day in and day out, I think this past year would have been a lot easier to accept.
Do you tie in? I know Hinkie said he hopes that he would have the ability that he would have taken Okafor even if they knew fully about Embiid. But is Okafor here because of the uncertain future of Embiid in any thought in your mind, or is he here because he was the best player?
I think he's here largely because he was the best player. What I do think it shows is why they go with that philosophy. I think they want the best player because right now there is no certainty. And there's no certainty that, all these kids that they have are going to develop, that they're all going to stay healthy, and that, they're going to hit on every draft pick. They just don't go in thinking that way. So I think they're going to take the best player available. And I think Embiid's injury shows why that's, a prudent strategy at this stage of the rebuild. So I guess yes, I do think that if Embiid were healthy, they still would have gone that way. And it's because there's just no certainty right now.
Do you lean more towards Embiid not playing this year?
I mean, it's almost an impossible question to answer.
I know we're June.
I would kind of be. I don't think he's going to miss I wouldn't say he's definitely going to miss the entire season. At this point, I would probably be surprised if he plays day one, though.
That's very disappointing.
It's very. I mean, look, we look at all these guys. We look at Noel. We look at Okafor, and I like Okafor, and he's going to be fun to watch. You just don't see many guys come in with that skill set, with that ability to pass, and really the ability to be a focal point from the post anymore. It's just not a skill that's developed all that much in the lower levels. But to me, Embiid is the best player that they have on the roster.
What is your read, Derek, on Sam's description or his explanation on where Embiid is from his press conference the other day? I mean, they say they should have an answer on his status in about a month. He said the team is more concerned with his long-term health. I mean, did you get the feeling from Sam that they have no idea what's going on?
I mean, this is all speculation. But
sure.
To me, it almost seems like they are looking for somebody to tell them some positive news and not reinforce what they fear. To me, it almost seems like they're fearful that it's not a good outcome, and they're looking for somebody to find, something that's been missed that can change that outcome. No, I think they're definitely still looking for information, and they want to get as many opinions as they can. But it would surprise me if they at least don't have an inkling of which way this is going to go.
The next really big thing for them is free agency coming up, and he said, we're not going to rule out a max player. We're going to look around. Do you see anybody that makes sense? I mean, it's not a great free agent class. Best players are restricted players here. So is that him just trying to appease people, or do you think they legitimately have some guys they're targeting? And are there guys that, in your opinion, make sense to come here?
Yeah, well, I think in the right situation they would, go out and try to do something this summer. I think, that changing the salary cap going up, starting in 2016 and again in 2017, really changes the structure so much that even a guy, maybe you give a guy $14, $15 million this year at a max contract, and maybe he's not worth it. But because of how much the cap's going to go up, it's going to be a good deal, in 2 or 3 years down the line. So I think they could look at some of these guys and say, hey, we could get these guys on real steals. The problem, like you said, is they're all restricted free agents, especially the young guys the Sixers would be going for. Guys like Jimmy Butler, guys like Kawhi Leonard, Draymond Green. Those teams, they realize the changing salary cap landscape as well, and they know they're going to be steals. So I can't imagine, to me, they're going to bite the bullet, pay that salary now because they know in 2 years they're going to be in a good financial shape and away from the luxury tax. The one guy I thought was really interesting was Chris Middleton of the Bucks. Sam Hinkie said he wants guys who are, have shown that they're going to improve, who can shoot, who can, play defense as well. And I think Middleton's shown that, and who's young enough that he can grow with the team. And the Bucks were in kind of bad salary cap space heading up, to the trade deadline. But they traded Brandon Knight, who was going to come up for an extension for MCW, who still got years on his rookie contract. And they flexed. They stretched out Larry Sanders, so his cap hit is much less than it used to be. So they basically got, they were going to be up against the luxury tax in order to re-sign Middleton, and now they're a little bit under their cap, I think. So I think the February trade deadline might have killed the Sixers' chances of getting him. I think there are other smaller names. One name I've seen speculate a lot is Corey Joseph. Another good guy, another guy who can get to the rim.
He's restricted, however, right?
He is restricted. He's another guy coming off a 4-year deal, but he can get to the rim. His jump shot. He's always been a good mid-range shooter. He started extending that out to 3-point range. He can defend a little bit. He to me would be a good target, but again, I think it's hard to pull those young guys away from the Spurs sometimes.
Give me your thoughts on this whole agents don't want to deal with Philly, players don't want to sign here. To me, if the team's good and 3 years down the road, you got Okafor and Embiid playing at a high level, and I'm a guard, and they have money, I think I want to play here. Do you buy into it all that free agents are not going to want to play here?
Well, I mean, free agents I don't think are going to want to play here now because they're bad, but I think that's kind of expected. That's
right.
Almost irrespective of Sam Hinkie's personality or how he does his business. I think by and large players will play where the best situation is for them, both financially and in terms of being able to compete. So I think down the line, if this rebuild does turn around, then no, I don't worry about that too much. and agents have to do what is best for their clients. I think where this is mostly coming from are second round picks, where Sam Hinkie has tried to get them under 4-year deals with almost no guarantee, because of second rounders don't have a whole lot of leverage, and the Sixers being under the salary cap have a little bit more flexibility in what they can offer guys like that. So I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. I think it's mostly those second round guys, those fringe guys that the agents really don't want to go to the Sixers because they don't want the Sixers to use that leverage and be able to get them on what's really bad deals for those guys.
All right, we got a lot to get into. We got a ton of questions for Derek that have been coming in throughout the day. We're going to get to some of those questions. Free agency is on the way. You heard his thoughts on the draft. 609-573-ESPN, 609-573-3776. Text ESPN and your question to the number 89,000 on the Harbor Pines Golf Club text board. And we'll also read off your Twitter questions. Use the hashtag Sixers973. And we got about a half hour left to play here. The Sixers have a very interesting offseason coming up. We'll also take a look at their current roster. Who are some guys that are ready to make a big jump? And we'll also take a look at some of the guys that may be here, may not be here. They have a couple free agents, some interesting ones as well. Full hour Sixers insider Derek Bodner is in studio here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN.